Hello, this is the video lesson for the open versus closed form. You should have completed the open and closed form activity discussion before watching this video. And since you have done so, you and your group and the class have noticed some interesting distinctions between the two texts that we read for the activity. So now I want to give a name or to submit to you that we can think about these two short texts, Rockwood and Merton, as examples of two different kinds of writing. On one hand, we have closed form writing, which is exemplified by Rockwood's letter to the editor. Now, on the other hand, we have open form writing, exemplified by Thomas Merton's A Festival of Rain. As your discussion no doubt drew out, Rockwood's letter to the editor has very distinct textual features or characteristics to it. The style of writing is very much what you might expect in an academic essay. It is what we were just discussing, a top-down structure. It starts with a thesis statement that's very clearly stated early in the letter and moves through three very clear structured top-down paragraphs with topic sentences. The argument structure is logical. Each point in the argument is its own distinct point, and Rockwood submits evidence, factual evidence, to sort of support those points. So the rhetorical strategy is very much the logical approach, building credibility through the research he's done, through his obvious knowledge of the topic. His writing style is clear and straightforward. And you might even say that his tone is almost cold because he's being sort of scientific or direct about what he's trying to argue. On the other hand, we have Thomas Merton's A Festival of Rain. It's also a piece that has a purpose, but how Merton is trying to accomplish his purpose and make his point is very different, or at least the strategies he is using are very different from the strategies Rockwood used. Where we might say that Rockwood's letter to the editor is a thesis-driven style of writing, that is a top-down structure like academic essays, Merton is doing something a lot less direct than that. He winds his way towards his thesis, and he doesn't even honestly give his thesis. You have to sort of read between the lines to sort of interpret what he's trying to say, what he wants to get his readers to do and to think. We might describe this as a thesis-delayed or a thesis-seeking style of writing. There is no thesis given in the beginning. In fact, it's kind of the opposite of the top-down structure. Instead of telling us what he's going to tell us, he just starts walking in that direction, slowly winding his way up toward it. So the argument techniques are very different. He uses things like storytelling, talking about using narrative structures to sort of explain by illustration, by example, what he's trying to get at. He uses metaphor. He uses poetic or figurative language. His tone is reflective, and whereas Rockwood might be sort of said to be cold, his tone is very intimate and warm. And almost the structure, instead of being linear, 3 points, his structure is almost circular. He has an idea in mind, and he kind of like passes by once, passes by twice. He keeps coming back around, trying to explain the same idea in the same way. So what we call a circular style of or organizational style. So I've said that these two styles of writing could be described as closed or open. So think of writing as falling somewhere along a closed to open spectrum. On the closed end, you have the genres of writing or the styles of writing in which the structure is very predetermined. It's very rigid. You're supposed to write in a specific way. There are conventions, for example, in academic writing or in journalistic writing, write letter to the editor, for example. Certain situations of writing, genres or contexts in which you write, require you to follow very specific conventions, maybe a business letter or an email, a professional email. There are very specific rules or conventions that govern how you are supposed to be effective in those genres. Well, we can call those genres closed because there's not a lot of room for the writer to make choices, creative choices to express his or her point. You have to follow the conventions. Open form writing is much more fluid. Like Merton, you can engage in indirect techniques. You can allow the point you're trying to make to kind of shape the form and the tone, and you can use all these different methods and styles that are not allowed in much more conventional, strict conventional all kinds of writing. You can engage all those different techniques to try to make your point. So if all writing exists somewhere along this continuum from closed to open. And I would want to point out all of these options, all the closed styles and all the open styles, they're all perfectly good. It's not that one is better than the other. In fact, it's really about the rhetorical situation, recognizing what kind of situation you're in. Are you in a closed form situation or are you in an open form situation? Employing the options you have and the strategies you have available to you given that situation, and doing a really effective job with the piece of writing based on that. So closed is just as great as open. It's just different, and so you have to be aware of both of these types. Now, so far in this course, we have been focusing on closed form writing. You've been writing close reading essays, and those have been fairly structured. You're supposed to have a thesis and so on, and I gave you very specific instructions for how to write those. In the next few weeks of the course, I'm setting you loose to do an open form assignment, in which you'll be able to make a lot more, you'll have a lot more freedom to make some choices about what kind of techniques you want to use to make your point. One more thing I want to point out is that I've given you this week some ekphrastic writing to read and think about, particularly ekphrastic poetry. I have a series of poems that I've copied out of a book, and they're called ekphrastic. What is ekphrastic? Ekphrastic is the Greek term to describe writing about another kind of art, usually visual art like painting or sculpture. The poems you have are based on paintings, and you'll see in the scan, the paintings are included there for you to look at and think about as you read the poem. Now the thing about ekphrastic writing is that it is an open form of interpretation. Close reading essays ask you to interpret a painting or a visual text using more closed form tools, analysis, close reading observation skills, compositional, etc. The ekphrastic poem is asking you, or allows you as a writer to interpret a painting, as those poets do, but to use any much more creative techniques. So think about those poems when you read them as interpretations, if you will, of those paintings. They're still saying something about those paintings. In particular, they're making you maybe like them more than you otherwise did, or not like them as much as you thought you did, or think something very different than you originally thought about them. They're commenting on the painting, they're interpreting it, they're analyzing it, but you feel like you're reading a poem and it's much more fluid and creative. So they're still doing interpretation. So in ekphrastic writing, you're doing open form interpretation. So for your open form close reading assignment, which you have due next week, and you'll be starting this week, the idea is to interpret a work of art using open form techniques. And I've given you two options. You have the narrative option to tell a story about an encounter you had with a work of art, or to do the ekphrastic option where you interpret a work of art in a poetic form or some other literary form like we see those examples. Okay, have a fun week beginning this assignment, and I will see you in Foxtail and in Zoom or by email. Keep doing great work. Keep going. See you soon.